it's interesting when you look at the United States, especially, there are certain states that have really high rates of obesity. We're talking like over 50% of the people living in the state are considered obese. And so it's a significant public health problem. And it's not just about, how you look and whatnot. It's really about the fact that when people have obesity, they're at much greater risk for developing a lot of these, medical problems and psychological issues that are not necessarily as common in people who have a lower body weight.
Have you looked at the role of the microbiome in governing cravings and affecting what people want and don't want? Is your research stuck more, just the person's somatic cells in their body?
Well, we've really, in my lab, because we're, neuroscientists, we've been pretty heavily focused on the brain that's, above the neck. But I'm glad you brought up the microbiome, because we are learning so much about the connection between the gut and the brain. And so, what's happening in the gut is really often dictating what happens in the brain. And so that's why it is important that we, think about this from the standpoint of, what you put in your body in terms of food, it's going to end up in your gut, and that's going to send messages to your brain that are going to dictate your health and your cravings and, all the other aspects of what goes into appetitive behavior. So I think that story is emerging, and it's really interesting so far.
Yeah, like I was sick for a few weeks. Now I'm just about over it. I'm getting better. But, this has happened before. But, I was really sick for one day. I didn't eat. And then I started eating again slowly and things got better. But the things I was eating before, like now I could really taste the salt and the sugar and things. It's like, wow. It just seems like it was amplified like 100 times. And I remember that's happened before when I've been sick. So it's interesting. I wonder if the body, if sugar is, let's say, a poison to the body, and too much salt and too much this and too much that. But when you're sick, maybe because your immune system's been activated, maybe that's why these tastes are highly exaggerated and makes you not want to eat them.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I think that could potentially be the case. I think that, again, when we're sick, right, our immune system and our bodies are going to do everything that they can to make sure that we get better and don't get worse, right? And so it kind of makes sense that, things that are probably not good for our health, like too much salt, too much sugar, would probably be avoided, and our bodies wouldn't want those, and we would kind of reject them. Another idea, though, I think could be that if you do go a day or two without having, a lot of sugar, right? If you get an illness and you don't eat anything for a day or so, a lot of times, it just takes that amount of time for your taste buds to really just shift in a way that, now you taste the actual food, right? You can taste what it really tastes like. When you're consuming foods with added sugar day in and day out, often we have a tolerance to that taste. We don't even taste it anymore because we're just so used to tasting it. That's why people often need stuff to be sweeter and sweeter and sweeter. So I think it could be a combination of both of those ideas.
So what instances have you seen where there's like a reset in what someone wants, like their palate seems to be a reset? It seems like sickness does it. What else have you seen?
Well, certainly, when people make the decision to change what they're eating and decide, okay, I'm going to cut back on the added sugar, that's really when you start to see a lot of changes. And, people will often comment about how foods that they used to think were delicious now suddenly taste aversive because they're just so sweet, and they just, it's not an ideal level of sweetness. And, I think that that's one of the factors that can help people when they are cutting back on added sugar, because then if you do say, okay, let me have a slice of this cake that I used to absolutely love, you might find that it actually doesn't taste that good anymore. And that's because, again, our brains and our taste buds are changing to adapt to that change where we're not constantly stimulating it with added sugar.
I know. Why would there be a craving for sugar? Like, what's the benefit of it? It's your body telling you, "Ooh, I want this." But why would it tell you it wants it if it's detrimental to you?
Well, it's really interesting. We have this evolutionary drive to like things that taste sweet. And so if you think back to like our hunter and gatherer ancestors, we used to have to walk around a forest and look for a berry bush and, hopefully find one. And then when you found that berry bush, you would eat all the berries, right? Because they're good for you and you need food. And the sweet berries are the ones that are safe to eat, right? The ones that are sour, that have fallen to the forest floor, that, are moldy and dirty, those are the ones you don't want to eat. They're not going to taste sweet. They're going to taste sour, and they're probably rotten and bad for you. So we developed this way in which we think about foods, in that if it's sweet, it's safe. If it's not sweet or sour, then it's usually not safe. And now the problem is that's not true anymore. Now, just because something is sweet doesn't mean it's safe, because we have so many processed foods that are dominating our food supply that are loaded with added sugar. Now all this sweet stuff isn't necessarily safe for us, but we still have that biological drive to eat it. And so that's really what we're up against. I mean, we're really fighting our, evolution against now our modern day food environment and the types of foods that are really, the source of most of the calories that people are consuming.